This weekend, an absolutely wild main event at featherweight. We have the Bird Whisperer Calvin Kattar taking on Josh Emmett, a man with power in his hands. It doesn't matter if it's the first minute or the 15th minute. It won't matter if it's the first minute or the 25th minute in this 5-round main event. Josh Emmett, one of those guys that you can never count out. You look at the win streak that he's on right now. Wins over Michael Johnson, Mirsad Bektic. You've got Sugar Shane Burgos, which Sugar really isn't his nickname. It's Hurricane. And Dan Ige last time out. And I gotta say, that Dan Ige fight was very close. I mean, first round,
Josh Emmett won.
First round decisive. Second rounds were close. MMA decisions. It was 7-6 in terms of Emmett, but again, a very, very close fight and very deserving of this matchup against Calvin Kattar, a guy who had Dan Ige's number when they met in a big-time main event. And I absolutely love this one, and I can't wait to get to the YouTube community tab, Matt, to talk about the comments from the fans of Fight Night Picks, because there's a lot of strong opinions over there, and you folks get a voice, so make sure you check that out if you have not already. But Matt, when it comes down to this one, I mean, you look at it for Calvin Kattar and the recent run that he's been able to go on, that big-time Giga Chikadze win, it's a fight of the night. But man, Calvin Kattar looked amazing in that fight because it was such a nice comeback from the fight of the night where he was on the wrong side of a poster against Max Holloway's time before that.
That's the thing about Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar occupies a very interesting space in this division because he has fought the top levels throughout his division. He has wins over, his losses are only 2. Renato Moicano, who at the time was a ranked fighter and thought of very highly in the division. Zabit, who it was a weird 3-round main event in Russia, should have been 5 rounds, and if it was, Calvin Kattar's probably going to win that fight. And Max Holloway, arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time, regardless of weight division. And the problem is, though, that Max Holloway fight was a real readjustment for Calvin Kattar. Like, when you eat 445 significant strikes, if that's what the UFC Stats website has, that is a life-changing amount of damage. Now, it is kind of wild that in his next performance, he had one that was very similar as to what Holloway was able to do to him. He taught Giga Chikadze a lesson on how to box in MMA, and how throwing kicks at distance is great, but if you don't have great gas tank, if you don't have great boxing defense, those things do start to fall off a hill after the first and second round, and Calvin Kattar was really able to weaponize his pace to a beautiful effect in that fight. But against Josh Emmett, are you really going to want to take those chances in the pocket like you were able to against Giga Chikadze? Because fighting Josh Emmett is basically the exact opposite of fighting Giga. At Giga, you can't stand at range. He's going to kick your legs. He's going to kick your body. You want to get on the inside, really make him pay for his inability to use his hands offensively. Well, Josh Emmett could not be any more different. Emmett on the outside, he'll throw an inside leg kick a la Dan Henderson from time to time, but Emmett's not the type of guy who's going to be throwing head kicks at range. No, he's going to duck in, use his side-to-side movement, get on the inside, and make you pay with big hooks. And I'll be very interested to see how Calvin Kattar, fights this fight, because if he uses his jab a lot, I think he can have a ton of success. Almost fight like Devin Haney fought George Kambosos Jr. in their last fight. Avoid the big exchanges with big power punches, and really make him pay with your volume on the outside, because I gotta be honest, when I looked at this fight, Josh Emmett's had a lot of fights that are very similar to this one. It's, hey, you're fighting a guy who technically is probably a bit better of a boxer than you are. He's going to throw a few more punches than you do, but at some point he's going to leave his hands down. And that's the thing, when you're fighting Josh Emmett, I said at the start of this video and I'm sticking by it, I think Josh Emmett, pound for pound, has the most power in the UFC. He dropped Shane Burgos so hard, he made him fly across the UFC cage. Now, that fight was incredible.
So did Calvin Kattar.
But the thing is, Josh Emmett dropped him on a torn ACL. He tore his ACL in the first round of that fight and got better as the fight continued.
Yeah, I'm going to throw that graphic up there. We threw it out there before Josh Emmett fought Dan Ige. It was all of the knee injuries that he had going into the Ige fight. And I thought, that's not all that good. Now, that was back in December when he had the fight against Ige. He looked pretty good in that fight. He didn't really look like he missed a step. Now, the one thing with Josh Emmett, and again, if you're a big stat nerd, if you like to have the fun, you look at it, you look at these two guys and how they're lined up. The one troubling thing is the strikes absorbed per minute number for Calvin Kattar. Also consider that Max Holloway landed 445 significant strikes in that fight.
Wilt Chamberlain numbers.
Take that number out of it and it's completely different. But again, Calvin Kattar fights at a higher pace and he can keep that pace through 5 rounds. Yeah. Josh Emmett, we haven't necessarily seen it, but the purpose of my talk here is the fact that I go back to the fight that he had against Michael Johnson where he's losing that fight. He's getting outdone, similar to what Calvin Kattar could do to him. He's losing at distance, it just takes 1 second to where he wins that one in that third round, later in the third round, and he's able to finish Michael Johnson. Is it the most entertaining first 2 rounds and a half? Not necessarily. But Josh Emmett has that ability. And this is a guy that injuries from Burgos to Ige fight, injuries that he sustained in the fight against Jeremy Stephens, like broken orbital bone, concussion issues since then, and he's looked amazing in these last 4 fights. And even before that, I mean, his only other loss to Desmond Green in the UFC.
He has a knockdown in every single fight he's had since late 2017. Those aren't stats that we normally talk about. Like, that's how heavy-handed Josh Emmett is. And he makes you pay for standing in the pocket, which just so happens to be where Calvin Kattar has the majority of his own success. So I think this fight stylistically is as good as any. And it is very interesting when you look back at the career of Josh Emmett, because really hasn't fought a lot of primary wrestlers. And me as an MMA fan really does appreciate that, because it does kind of lend into what his style is. Now, when you wrestle Josh Emmett, not the greatest idea. He does have an extensive background as a collegiate wrestler, but people have been able to have some success in the past at trying to take down Josh Emmett. It at least puts out some of the fire that he does bring into the cage. So I'll be interested to see if Emmett goes for his own takedown, because he is going to have to find ways to get on the inside of the range of Calvin Kattar. But again, no matter how you cut this, I think this fight's going to be extremely competitive from, like you said, the first minute of it till the last minute of it, if it does go 25, because Calvin Kattar does not get tired when he's the one being the offensive fighter. But is it easy to throw your own 150 punches in a fight if Josh Emmett's meeting you with power shots every single time you enter the pocket? And that's the thing I keep on going back to when you talk about Josh Emmett. Every person who he has fought for the last 5 years have been dropped by. Like, that is a ridiculous stat. It really is. And Calvin Kattar has a phenomenal chin, but we know he has a phenomenal chin because he's gotten hit quite a few times in his career. And this is one of those fights where it seems like a cheap cop-out because he did it to Michael Johnson, but everything could be going wrong for Josh Emmett just for him to land that one magic shot in the 4th round, 5th round that completely turns the tide of this fight, because he knocked out Mirsad Bektic with the jab. That's how heavy-handed this man is, and he's got his own great boxing technique. So no matter what a person's prediction is, they could convince me.
He knocked down Felipe Arantes 4 times and beat him by decision. What the hell's Felipe Arantes made out of?
Just vibranium?
Vibranium.
That's the stuff that's in Wolverine.
The man's made of vibranium. Matt, so we have a look over in the YouTube community tab. We mentioned this earlier. We want to get to your comments. And listen, 741 total votes, 80% of the fans going with Calvin Kattar. Chad the UFC dad saying, such tough pick again this week. It's hard to go against Calvin after his last performance, but I just see Emmett taking a W back to Cali. Hanky2 Raw saying, it's tough to know how much to take from the Giga fight since Giga gassed in the 2nd round, but I'm still leaning towards Kattar. Don't panic, says a year ago I probably would have went with Emmett, but the way that Kattar has been looking, I'm leaning towards him. Tough call either way, going to be one hell of a fight. If you do look at it for Calvin Kattar, 4 months ago when he fought Giga Chikadze back in January for Mr. Josh Emmett, it was late 2021. Couple of more comments. Adam saying, I think Emmett lands some big shots early and has some moments, but Kattar ends up out-voluming him over the length of this fight. And one more, Matt. We'll go to Paul Pierce, throwing it up there. Emmett overextends an overhand, and Kattar catches him with an elbow.
I'm glad that you read that one, because if you remember the Jeremy Stephens fight, that's basically exactly how it ended. Stephens overextends himself, gets hit by that elbow on the inside. You know what else happened on that exchange, though? Jeremy Stephens' punch did land, and it shattered the nose of Calvin Kattar, like, very, very bad. And if Josh Emmett's able to land the exact same shot, the difference is, I know Emmett got knocked out by Jeremy Stephens, but MMA math doesn't work that way. Emmett is more heavy-handed, I would say, than Jeremy Stephens at this stage of his career, and I think he can make Calvin Kattar pay a lot more for his misses in this fight than even some of Calvin Kattar's recent past opponents can, because Holloway's a better striker than Josh Emmett, but like, nobody, even Max Holloway's biggest supporter, is going to tell you he has the power that Josh Emmett has on the feet.
No, Josh Emmett has career-ending types of power, and again, you talked about it. This is a guy that went to college for wrestling, got into MMA, told himself if I lose a fight, well, then I'm just going to retire.
And
Just didn't. Kept winning over in California, ends up in the UFC. Yes, you lose the Desmond Green. He got out-volumed in that one. He got taken down, which you had mentioned. Could that be one of those X factors? Josh Emmett is a good offensive wrestler, but he doesn't normally have to rely on. He's one of those guys, he has odd movement when he's on the feet. Like
he does that like shuffle side.
Yeah, we touched on it in this card. Like a guy like Jeremiah Wells that just completely forgot what MMA was at the start of his last fight and just ran into the cage and then thought, I'm here. This is a part of it. For Josh Emmett, no. He does move side to side so quickly and so well, keeps his chin tucked, keeps himself on the inside. And that's the other thing. You look at this fight. Josh Emmett, 5 inches shorter, but only 2 inches less in terms of his reach. He knows his size very well. That might sound silly to hear it from me. We touch on this all the time. There's so many Stefan Struves out there in MMA. There's so many welterweights that are 6 feet tall that have no idea how to use the length and reach that they have, that they end up in boxing range and they get clipped. Josh Emmett's one of those guys that understands that distance management so very well. So if we do have a look at the odds, we already hit your fan votes that are out there. Calvin Kattar is the favorite, open -170, -244 right now. Josh Emmett open to +145, +194 as it stands. So another fight, Matt, on this card where there's more than a 2-1 favorite. So what's the pick here?
Calvin Kattar's going to win this fight until he doesn't, and for that sole reason, I've got Calvin Kattar. Kattar's going to be the more likely fighter to win rounds in this fight. I know Josh Emmett has career-altering power, like you would say, but again, he has to land that power from to really be able to win a round. And unless you think Josh Emmett's going to end the fight with Calvin Kattar with 3-4 knockdowns, or win by knockout, of course, I am going to find it very difficult for Emmett to make his way into the 25th minute and be able to bank 3 rounds. I just don't think he does enough on the in-betweens to really be able to secure enough minutes and enough moments to win a decision in a 5-round fight. But on the flip side, and again, I'm arguing with myself today, a 5-round fight could help Josh Emmett because every time he's in the cage, it's just like a 10% chance. Is this punch going to land? Because if it does, he'll win by knockout. It just gives him 10 more minutes of opportunities to land that one fight ender against Calvin Kattar. And we do know that Emmett does carry his power very late into fights. So I think this is going to be an incredible fight no matter who is able to get the win. I'm surprised the odds are as far apart as they are. I see this fight as being like Calvin Kattar, maybe like a -150 around there, I'd say, just because he is quite hittable. And against a guy like Josh Emmett, that's probably the last attribute that you want to be known for. But I do have Calvin Kattar in this fight because I just think he's going to be able to win rounds on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, the only sites that have Emmett to win inside of the distance, like, it's kind of crazy to see it. So Emmett wins by decision +470. Like, you look at it that way. So Emmett wins inside of the distance +408. Wins by submission +2,000. So it's way up there. Wins by KO or TKO, it's around again another +400, +435. So again, if Josh Emmett's going to win, more than likely he wins by finish if he wins at all. For Calvin Kattar, again, it's the accumulation of volume to me. And I know it's going to be either Josh Emmett knocks him out, Calvin Kattar wins by decision. There's also the type of reality where Calvin Kattar is able to either catch him in the in-between or he's able to just put that accumulation on him, similar to what we've seen Max Holloway do to fighters where he was able to break down a Brian Ortega. There is a possibility that Calvin Kattar can take that game plan and implement it against a guy like Josh Emmett. So I will be eager to see what we get out of both these fighters, eager to see the game plan out of New England Cartel, who also have a fighter in this co-main event of Joe Lauzon taking on Cowboy Cerrone. So maybe Lauzon gets a win, like puts a beer on his eye and then kind of cools it down and walks back out. And for Josh Emmett with Team Alpha Male, will they mix in the wrestling? That remains to be seen, but a really good main event.
Oh, I'm really excited for this fight. Again, both guys are going to be very similar versions of themselves in the 5th round as they are in the 1st round. That's all you can ask for in a main event. Like, sometimes you get a heavyweight main event, you're a little worried what it's going to look like after it goes past that 1st round. These guys are going to be game no matter what point of the fight it is, no matter what position the fight's in. I think it's going to be a great fight, but yeah, I still have Calvin Kattar.
Big time main event, both of us going with the Boston Bird friend. It is Calvin Kattar to get the win. Question mark kicks 2 hours before the prelims. Mark it on your calendar. Set the notifications here on YouTube. Subscribe if you have not already so you can catch us live for that show on Saturday. Toss a like. It really does help out the show. You folks do a great job of that over on Question Mark Kicks as well. Everybody that hits up the super chat, that hits up a super like, and that helps out the channel and helping all of us grow in 2022. We get some great fights coming up this weekend. Next weekend, Mateusz Gamrot taking on a tricky Arman Tsarukyan. It's a great time to be an MMA fan. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say, let's get into it.